All right, Tom Thumb. How now, brothers Grimm, Wilhelm, and Jacob. A poor woodman sat at his cottage one night, smoking his pipe by the fireside, while his wife sat by his side, spinning. "How lonely it is, wife," said he, as he puffed out a long curl of smoke, "for you and me to sit here by ourselves without any children to play about and amuse us, while other people seem so happy and merry with their children." "What you say is very true," said the wife, sighing and turning round her wheel. "How happy should I be if I had but one child, but if it were ever so small, nay, if it were no bigger than my thumb, I should be very happy and love it dearly." Now, odd as you may think it, it came to pass that this good woman's wish was fulfilled just in the very way she had wished it. For not long afterwards she had a little boy who was quite healthy and strong, but was not much bigger than my thumb. So they said, "Well, we cannot say we have not got what we wished for, and little as he is, we will love him dearly," and they called him Thomas Thumb. They gave him plenty of food, yet for all they would do he never grew bigger, but kept just the same size as he had been when he was born. Still his eyes were sharp and sparkling, and he soon showed himself to be a clever little fellow, who always knew well what he was about. One day, as the woodman was getting ready to go into the wood to cut off fuel, he said, "I wish I had something to bring in the cart after me, for I want to make haste." "Oh, father," cried Tom, "I will take care of that. The cart shall be in the wood by the time you want it." Then the woodman laughed and said, "How can that be? You cannot reach up to the horse's bridle." "Never mind that, father," said Tom. "If my mother will only harness the horse, I will get into his ear and tell him which way to go." "Well," said the father, "we will try for once." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse to the cart and put Tom into his ear, and as he sat there the little man told the beast how to go, crying out, "Go on and stop," as he wanted, and thus the horse went in just as well as if the woodman had driven himself into the wood. It happened that as the horse was going a little too fast, and Tom was calling out, "Gently, gently," two strangers came up. "What an odd thing that is," said one. "There's a cart going along, and I hear a carter talking to the horse, but yet I can see no one." "That is queer indeed," said the other. "Let us follow the cart and see where it goes." So they went on into the wood, till at last they came to the place where the woodman was. Then Tom Thumb, seeing his father, cried out, "See, father, here I am with the cart, all right and safe. Now take me down." So his father took hold of the horse with one hand, and with the other took his son out of the horse's ear, and put him down upon a straw, where he sat as merry as you please. The two strangers were all this time looking on, and did not know what to say for yonder. At last one took the other side, and said, "That little urchin will make our fortune if we can get him and carry him about from town to town as a show. We must buy him." So they went up to the woodman and asked him what he would take for the little man. "You will be better off," said they, "with us than with you." "I won't accept him at all," said the father. "Why, my own flesh and blood is dearer to me than all the silver and gold in the world." But Tom, hearing the bargain they wanted to make, crept up his father's coat to his shoulder and whispered in his ear, "Take the money, father, and let them have me. I'll soon come back to you." So the woodman at last said he would sell Tom to the strangers for a large piece of gold, and they paid the price. "Where would you like to sit?" said one of them. "Oh, put me on the rim of your hat. That will be a nice gallery for me. I can walk about there and see the country as we go along." So they did as he wished, and when Tom had taken leave of his father, they took him away with them. They journeyed on till it began to be dusk, and then the little man said, "Let me get down, I'm tired." So the man took off his hat and put him down on a clod of earth in a pluffed field by the side of the road. But Tom ran about amongst the furrows, and at last slipped into an old mouse hole. "Good night, my masters," said he, "I'm off. Mind and look sharp after me the next time." Then they ran at once to the place and poked the ends of the sticks into the mouse hole, but all in vain. Tom only crawled further and further in, and at last became quite dark, so that they were forced to go their way without their prize, sulky as could be. When Tom found they were gone, he came out of the hiding place. "What dangerous walking it is," said he, "in this pluffed field. If I there to fall from one of these great clods, I should undoubtedly break my neck." At last, by good luck, he found a large empty snail shell. "This is lucky," said he. "I can sleep very well here." And in they crept. Just as he was falling asleep, he heard two men passing by, chatting together, and one said to the other, "How can we rob that rich parson's house of his silver and gold?" "I'll tell you," cried Tom. "What noise was that?" Said the thief, frightened. "I'm sure I heard someone speak." They stood still listening, and Tom said, "Take me with you, and I'll soon show you how to get the parson's money." "But where are you?" said they. "Look about on the ground," answered he, "and listen where the sound comes from." At last the thieves found him out and lifted him up in their hands. "You little urchin," they said, "what can you do for us?" "Why, I can get between the iron window bars of the parson's house and throw you out whatever you want." "That's a good thought," said the thieves. "Come along, we shall see what you can do." When they came to the parson's house, Tom slipped through the window bars into the room, and then called out as loud as he could, "Brawl! Will you have all that is here?" As this the thieves were frightened, and softly speak low, that you may not awaken anybody. But Tom seemed as if he did not understand them, and bawled out again, "How much will you have? Shall I throw it all out?" Now the cook lay in the next room, and hearing a noise, she raised herself in her bed and listened. Meantime the thieves were frightened, and ran off a little way. But at last they plucked up their hearts, and said, "The little urchin was only trying to make fools of us." So they came back and whispered softly to him, saying, "Now let us have no more of your roguish jokes, but throw us out some of the money." Then Tom called out as loud as he could, "Very well, hold your hands, here it comes." The cook heard this quite plain, so she sprang out of bed and ran to the open door. The thieves ran off as if wolves was of their tails, and the maid, having groped about and found nothing, went away for a light. By the time she came back, Tom had slipped off into the barn, and when she had looked about and searched every hole and corner, and found nobody, she went to bed, thinking she must have been dreaming with her open eyes. The little man crawled about in the hay loft, and at last found a snug place to finish his night's rest in. So he laid himself down, meaning to sleep till daylight, and then find his way home to his father and mother. But alas, how woefully he was undone! What crosses and sorrows happen to us all in the world! The cook got up early, before daybreak, to feed the cows, and going straight to the hay loft, carried away a large bundle of hay, with the little man in the middle of it, fast asleep. He still, however, slept on, and did not awake till he found himself in the mouth of the cow. For the cook had put the hay into the cow's rick, and the cow had taken Tom up in a mouthful of it. "Good lack-a-day," said he, "how came I to tumble into the mill?" But he soon found out where he really was, and was forced to have all his wits about him, that he might not get between the cow's teeth, and so be crushed to death. At last down he went into his stomach. "It is rather dark," said he. "They forgot to build windows in this room to let the sun in. A candle would be no bad thing." Though he made the best of his bad luck, he did not like his quarters at all, and the worst of it was that more and more hay was always coming down, and the space left for him became smaller and smaller. At last he cried out as loud as he could, "Don't bring me any more hay! Don't bring me any more hay!" The maid happened to be just then milking the cow, and hearing someone speak, but seeing nobody, and yet being quite sure it was the same voice that she had heard in the night, she was so frightened that she fell off her stool and overset the milk pail. As soon as she could pick herself up out of the dirt, she ran off as fast as she could to her master the parson, and said, Sir, the cow is talking." But the parson said, "Woman, thou art surely mad." However, he went with her into the cow-house to try and see what was the matter. Scarcely had they set foot on the threshold when Tom called out, "Don't bring me any more hay." Then the parson himself was frightened, and thinking the cow was surely bewitched, told this man to kill her on the spot. So the cow was killed and cut up, and the stomach in which Tom lay was thrown out upon a dunghill. Tom soon set himself to work to get out, which was not a very easy task. But at last, just as easy had made room to get his head out, fresh ill luck befell him. A hungry wolf sprang out and swallowed up the whole stomach with Tom in it at one gulp, and ran away. Tom, however, was still not disheartened, And thinking that the wolf would not dislike having some chat with him as he was going along, he called out, "My good friend, I can show you a famous treat. Where's that?" said the wolf. In such and such house," said Tom, describing his own father's house. "You can crawl through the drain into the kitchen and into the pantry, and there you will find the cakes, ham, beef, cold chicken, roast pig, apple dumplings, and everything that your heart can wish." The wolf did not want to be asked twice, so that very night he went to the house and crawled through the drain into the kitchen, and then into the pantry, and ate and drank there to his hearty content. As soon as he had had enough, he wanted to get away, but he had eaten so much that he could not go out by the same way he came in. This way just what Tom had reckoned upon, and now he began to set up a great shout, making all the noise he could. "Will you be easy?" said the wolf. "You'll awaken everybody in the house if you make such a clatter." "What's that to me?" said the little man. "You have had your frolic. Now I've a mind to be merry myself," and he began singing and shouting as loud as he could. The woodman and his wife, being awakened by the noise, peeped through a crack in the door, but when they saw a wolf was there, you may well suppose that they were sadly frightened, and the woodman ran for his axe and gave his wife a scythe. "Do you stay behind," said the woodman, "and when I have knocked him on the head, you must rip him up with the scythe." Tom heard all this and cried out, "Father, father, I am here, the wolf has swallowed me." And the father said, "Heaven be praised, we have found our dear child again." And he told his wife not to use the scythe for fear she should hurt him. Then he aimed a great blow and struck the wolf on the head and killed him on the spot. And when he was dead, they cut open his body and set Tommy free. "Ah!" said the father, "what fears we have had for you." "Yes, father," answered he, "I have traveled all over the world, I think, in one way or other since we parted, and now I am very glad to come home and get fresh air again." "Why, there have you been," said the father. "I have been in a mouse hole, in a snail shell, and down a cow's throat, and in a wolf's belly, and yet here I am again, safe and sound." "Well said," they, "you are come back, and we will not sell you again for all the riches in the world." Then they hugged and kissed their dear little son, and gave him plenty to eat and drink, for he was very hungry, and then they fetched new clothes for him, for his old ones had been quite spoiled on his journey. So Master Thumb stayed at home with his father and mother in peace, for though he had been so great a traveler, and had done and seen so many fine things, and was fond enough of telling the whole story, he always agreed that after all there is no place like home. Okay, now we get that figured out. Rumpelstiltskin, the Brothers Grimm. Here we go. I remember this one. It's classic. By the side of a wood in a country a long way off ran a fine stream of water, and upon the stream there stood a mill. The miller's house was close by, and the miller, you must know, had a very beautiful daughter. She was, moreover, very shrewd and clever, and the miller was so proud of her that he one day told the king of the land, who used to come and hunt in the wood, that his daughter could spin gold out of straw. Now this king was very fond of money, and when he had heard the miller's boast, his greediness was raised, and he sent for the girl to be brought before him. Then he led her to a chamber in his palace, where there was a great heap of straw, and gave her a spinning wheel, and said, "All this must be spun into the gold before morning, as you love your life. It must be in vain that the poor maiden said that it was only a silly boast of her father, for that she could do no such thing as spin straw into gold." The chamber door was locked, and she was left alone. She sat down in one corner of the room and began to bewail her hard fate, when on a sudden the door opened, and a droll-looking little man hobbled in and said, "Good morrow to you, my good lass. What are you weeping for?" "Alas," said she, "I must spin the straw into gold, and I know not how." "What will you give me," said the hobgoblin, "to do it for you?" "My necklace," replied the maiden. He took her at her word, and set himself down to the wheel, and whistled and sang, round about, lo and behold, reel away, straw and gold." And round about the wheel went merrily, the work was quickly done, and the straw was all spun into gold. When the king came and saw this, he was greatly astonished and pleased, but his heart grew still more greedy of gain, and he shut up the poor miller's daughter again with a fresh task. And then she knew not what to do, and sat down once more to weep. But the dwarf opened the door and said, "What will you give me to do your task?" "The ring on my finger," said she. So her little friend took the ring and began to work at the wheel again, and whistled and sang. Round about, lo and behold, reel away, straw into gold, till long before morning all was done again. The king was greatly delighted to see all this glittering treasure, but still he had not enough, so he took the miller's daughter to a yet larger heap, and said, "All this must be spun tonight, and if it is, you shall be my queen." As soon as she was alone, that dwarf came in and said, "What will you give me to spin gold for you this third time?" "I have nothing left," said she. "Then say you will give me," said the little man, "the first little child that you may have when you are a queen." "That may never be," thought the miller's daughter, and as she knew no other way to get her task done, she said she would do what he asked. Round went the wheel again to the old song, and the mannikin once more spun the heap in gold. The king came into the morning, and finding all he wanted was forced to keep his word, so he married the miller's daughter, and she really became queen. At the birth of her first little child, she was very glad and forgot the dwarf and what she had said. But one day he came into her room where she was sitting playing with the baby, and put her in mind of it. Then she grieved sorely at her misfortune, and said she would give him all the wealth of the kingdom if he would let her off. But in vain, till at last her tears softened him, and he said, "I will give you 3 days' grace, and if during that time you tell me thy name, you shall keep your child." Now the queen lay awake all night, thinking of all the odd names that she had never heard, and she sent messengers all over the land to find out new ones. The next day the little man came in, and she began with Timothy, Ichabod, Benjamin, Jeremiah, and all the names she could remember. But to all and each of them he said, "Madam, that is not my name." The second day she began with all the common names she could bear: Bandy Legs, Hunchback, Crook Shanks, and so on. But the little gentleman still said to every one of them, "Madam, that is not my name." The third day one of the messengers came back and said, "I have traveled 2 days without hearing of any other names, but yesterday as I was climbing a high hill among the trees of the forest where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, I saw a little hut. And before the hut burnt a fire, and round about the fire a funny little dwarf was dancing upon one leg and singing, 'Merrily the feast I'll make, today I'll brew, tomorrow bake. Merrily I'll dance and sing, for next day will a stranger bring. Little does my lady dream, Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'" When the queen heard this, she jumped for joy, and as soon as her little friend came, she sat down upon her throne and called all her court round to enjoy the fun. And the nurse stood by her side with the baby in her arms, as if it was quite ready to be given up. Then the little man began to chuckle at the thought of having the little poor child to take home with him to his hut in the woods, and he cried out, "Now, lady, what is my name?" "Is it John?" asked she. "No, madam." "Is it Tom?" "No, madam." "Is it Jimmy?" "It is not." "Can your name be Rumpelstiltskin?" said the lady slyly. "Some witch told you that." "Some witch told you that!" cried the little man, and dashed his right foot in a rage so deep into the floor that she was forced to lay hold of it with both hands to pull it out. Then he made the best of his way off, while the nurse laughed and the baby crowed, and all the court jeered at him for having had such much trouble for nothing, and said, "We wish you a very good morning and a merry feast, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin." Yo, Thumper. Clever Gretel. There was once a cook named Gretel, who wore shoes with red heels, and when she walked out with them on, she turned herself this way and that, was quite happy and thought, "You certainly are a pretty girl." And when she came home, she drank, in her gladness of heart, a draught of wine, and as wine excites a desire to eat, she tasted the best of whatever she was cooking till she was satisfied, and said, "The cook must know what the food is like." It came to pass that the master one day said to her, "Oh, Gretel, there is a guest coming this evening. Prepare me 2 fowls for very daintily." "I will see to it, master," answered Gretel. She killed 2 fowls, scalded them, plucked them, put them on the spit, and towards evening set them before the fire, that they might roast. The fowls began to turn brown and were nearly ready, but the guest had not yet arrived. Then Gretel called out to her master, "If the guest does not come, I must take the fowls away from the fire, but it will be a sin and a shame if they are not eaten the moment they are at their juiciest." The master said, "I will run myself and fetch the guest." When the master had turned his back, Gretel laid the spit with the fowls on one side and thought, "Standing so long by the fire there makes one sweat and thirsty. Who knows when they will come? Meanwhile, I will run into the cellar and take a drink." She ran down, set a jug, said, "God bless it for you, Gretel," and took a good drink and thought that wine should flow on and should not be interrupted, and took yet another hearty draught. Then she went and put the fowls down again to the fire, basted them, and drove the spit merrily round. But as the roast meat smelt so good, Gretel thought, something might be wrong. It ought to be tasted. She touched it with a finger and said, "Ah, how good fowls are! It certainly is a sin and a shame that they are not eaten at the right time." She ran to the window to see if the master was not coming with his guests, but she saw no one, and went back to the fowls and thought, "One of the wings is burning. I had better take it off and eat it." So she cut it off, ate it, and enjoyed it, and when she had done, she thought, "The other must go down too, or else master will observe with something else that something is missing." When the 2 wings were eaten, she went and looked for her master, and did not see him. It suddenly occurred to her, "Who knows? They are perhaps not coming at all, and have turned in somewhere." Then she said, "Well, Gretel, enjoy yourself. 1 fowl has been cut in 2. Take another drink, and eat it up entirely. When it is eaten, you will have some peace. Why should God's good gifts be spoilt?" So she ran into the cellar again, took an enormous drink, and ate up the 1 chicken in a great glee. When one of the chickens was swallowed down, and still her master did not come, Gretel looked at the other and said, "What one is, the other should be likewise. The 2 go together. What's right for the one is right for the other. I think if I were to take another draught, it would do me no harm." So she took another hearty drink, and let the second chicken follow the first. While she was making the most of it, her master came and cried, "Hurry up, Gretel, the guest is coming directly after me." "Yes, sir, I will soon serve up," answered Gretel. Meantime the master looked to see what the table was properly laid, and took the great knife, wherewith he was going to carve the chickens and sharpen it on the steps. Presently the guest came and knocked politely and courteously at the house door. Gretel ran and looked to see who was there, and when she saw the guests, she put a finger to her lips and said, "Hush, hush! Go away as quickly as you can. If my master catches you, it will be the worse for you. He certainly did ask you to supper, but his intention is to cut off your 2 ears. Just listen how he is sharpening the knife for it." The guest heard the sharpening, hurried down the steps again as fast as he could. Gretel was not idle. She ran screaming to her master and cried, "You have invited a fine guest." "Why, Gretel, what do you mean by that?" "Yes," said she, "he has taken the chickens which I was going to serve up off the dish, and has run away with them." "That's a nice trick," said her master, and named it the fine chickens. "If he had but left me 1, so that something remained for me to eat." He called to him to stop, but the guest had pretended not to hear. Then he ran after him with the knife still in his hand, crying, just one," meaning that the guest should leave him just 1 chicken and not take both. The guest, however, thought no otherwise than that he was to give up 1 of his ears, and ran as if fire were burning under him in order to take them both with him. The Old Man and His Grandson. There was once a very old man whose eyes had become dim. His ears full of hearing, his knees trembled, and when he sat at his table he could hardly hold a spoon, and spilt the broth upon the tablecloth or let it run out of his mouth. His son and his son's wife were disgusted at this, so the old grandfather at last had to sit in the corner behind the stove, and they gave him his food in an earthenware bowl, and not even enough of it. And he used to look towards the table with his eyes full of tears. Once, too, his trembling hands could not hold his bowl, and it fell to the ground and broke. The young wife scolded him, but he said nothing and only sighed. Then they brought him a wooden bowl for a few halfpence, out of which he had to eat. They were once sitting thus when the little grandson of 4 years old began to gather together some bits of wood upon the ground. "What are you doing there?" asked the father. "I am making a little trough," answered the child, "for father and mother to eat out of when I am big." The man and his wife looked at each other for a while and presently began to cry. Then they took their old grandfather to the table, and henceforth always let him eat with them, and likewise said nothing if he did spill a little of anything. The Little Peasant, Brothers Grimm. There was a certain village wherein no one lived but really rich peasants, and just one poor one, whom they called the Little Peasant. He had not even so much as a cow, and still less money to buy one, and yet he and his wife did so wish to have one. One day he said to her, "Listen, I have a good idea. There's our gossip, the carpenter. He shall make us a wooden calf and paint it brown so that it looks like any other, and in time it will certainly get big and be a cow." The woman also liked the idea, and their gossip the carpenter cut and planed the calf and painted it ought to be, and made it with its head hanging down as if it were eating. Next morning, when the cows were being driven out, the little peasant called the cowherd in and said, "Look, I have a little calf here, but it is still small and has to be carried." The cowherd said, "All right," and took it in his arms and carried it to the pasture and set it among the grass. The little calf always remained standing like one which was eating. The cowherd said, "It will soon run by itself. Just look how it eats already." At night, when he was going to drive the herd home again, he said to the calf, "If you can stand there and eat your fill, you can always go on your 4 legs. I don't care to drag you home again in my arms." But the little peasant stood at the door and waited for his little calf, and when the cowherd drove the cows through the village and the calf was missing, he inquired where it was. The cowherd answered, "It is still standing out there eating. It will not stop and come with us." But the little peasant said, "Oh, but I must have my beast back again." When they went back to the meadow together, but someone had stolen the calf, and it was gone. The cowherd said, "It must have run away." The peasant, however, said, "Don't tell me that," and led the cowherd before the mayor, who for his carelessness condemned him to give peasant a cow for the calf which had run away. And now the little peasant and his wife and the calf, which they had so long wished, and they were heartily glad, but they had no food for it, and could give it nothing to eat. So it soon had to be killed. They salted the flesh, and the peasant went into the town and wanted to sell the skin there, so that he might buy a new calf with the proceeds. On the way he passed by a mill, and there sat a raven with broken wings, and out of pity he took him and wrapped him in the skin. But as the weather grew so bad, and there was a storm of rain and wind, he could go no further, and turned back to the mill and begged for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house, and said to the peasant, "Lay yourself on the straw there, and give him a slice of bread and cheese." The peasant ate it, and lay down with the skin before him, and the woman thought, "He is tired and has gone to sleep." In the meantime came the parson, and the miller's wife received him well, and said, "My husband is out, so we will have a feast." The peasant listened, and when he had heard them talk about feasting, he was vexed that he had been forced to make a shift with a slice of bread and cheese. Then the woman served up 4 different things: roast meat, salad, cakes, and wine. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, there was a knocking outside. The woman said, "Oh, heavens, it is my husband." She quickly hid the roast meat inside the tiled stove, the wine under the pillow, the salad on the bed, and the cakes under it, and the parson in the closet on the porch. Then she opened the door for her husband and said, "Thank heaven, you are back again. There is such a storm, it looks as if the world were coming to an end." The miller saw the peasant lying on the straw, and asked, "What is that fellow doing there?" "Ah," said the wife, "the poor knave came in the storm and rain, and begged for shelter, so I gave him a bit of bread and cheese, and showed him where the straw was." The man said, "I have no objection but to be quick and get something to eat." The woman said, "But I have nothing but bread and cheese. I am contented with anything," replied the husband. "So far as I am concerned, bread and cheese will do," and looked at the peasant and said, "Come and eat some more with me." The peasant did not require to be invited twice, but got up and ate. After this, the miller saw the skin in which the raven was, lying on the ground, and asked, "What have you there?" The peasant answered, "I have a soothsayer inside it." "Can he foretell anything to me?" said the miller. "Why not?" answered the peasant. "But he only says 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself." The miller was serious and said, "Let him foretell something for once." Then the peasant pinched the raven's head so that he croaked and made a noise like "Kurr, kurr." The miller said, "What did he say?" The peasant answered, "In the first place he says that there is some wine hidden under the pillow." "Bless me!" cried the miller, and went there and found the wine. "Now go on," said he. The peasant made the raven croak again and said, "In the second place he says that there is some roast meat in the tiled stove." "Upon my word!" cried the miller, and went thither and found the roast meat. The peasant made the raven prophecy still more and said, "Thirdly he says that there is some salad on his bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and went there and found the salad. At last the peasant pinched the raven once more until he croaked and said, "Fourthly he says that there are some cakes under the bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and looked there and found the cakes. And now the two sat down to the table together, but the miller's wife was frightened to death, and went to bed and took all the keys with her. The miller would have liked much to know the 5th, but the little peasant said, "First we will quickly eat 4 things, for the 5th is something bad." So they ate, and after they bargained how much the miller wished to give for the 5th prophecy, until they agreed on the 300 talers. Then the peasant once more pinched the raven's head till he croaked loudly. The miller asked, "What did he say?" The peasant replied, "He says that the devil is hiding outside there in the closet on the porch." The miller said, "The devil must go out," and opened the house door. Then the woman was forced to give up the key, and the peasant unlocked the closet. The parson ran out as fast as he could, and the miller said, "It was true. I saw the black rascal with my own eyes." The peasant, however, made off next morning by daybreak with the 300 talers. At home, the small peasant gradually launched out. He built a beautiful house, and the peasant said, "The small peasant has certainly been to the place where golden snow falls, and people carry the golden home in the shovels." Then the small peasant was brought before the mayor, and bidden to see from whence his wealth came. He answered, "I sold my cow's skin in this town for 300 talers." When the peasants heard that, they too wished to enjoy this great profit, and ran home, killed all the cows, and stripped off their skins in order to sell them in the town to the greatest advantage. The mayor, however, said, "But my servant must go first." When she came to the merchant in the town, he did not give her more than 2 talers for a skin. And when the others came, he did not give them so much, and said, "What can I do with all these skins?" Then the peasants were vexed that the small peasant should have thus outwitted them, wanted to take vengeance on him, and accused him of his treachery before the mayor. This innocent little peasant was unanimously sentenced to death, and was to be rolled into the water into a barrel pierced full of holes. He was led forth, and a priest was brought, who was so to say a mass for his soul. The others were all obliged to retire to a distance. And when the peasant looked at the priest, he recognized the man who had been with the miller's wife. He said to him, "I set you free from the closet. Set me free from the barrel." At this same moment up came with a flock of sheep with very shepherd, whom the peasant knew had long been wishing to be a mayor. So he cried with all his might, "No, I will not do it. If the world war insists on it, I will not do it." The shepherd hearing that came up to him and asked, "What are you about? What is it that you will not do?" The peasant said, "They want to make me mayor. If I will but put myself in the barrel, but I will not do it." The shepherd said, "If nothing more than that is needful in order to be mayor, I will get into the barrel at once." The peasant said, "If you will get in, you will be mayor." The shepherd was willing and got in, and the peasant shut the top down on him. Then he took the shepherd's flock for himself and drove it away. The parson went into the crowd and declared that the mass had been said. Then they came and rolled the barrel towards the watcher. When the barrel began to roll, the shepherd cried, "I am quite willing to be mayor." They believed no otherwise than that it was the peasant who was saying this, and answered, "That is what we intend. But first you shall look about you as little down below there." And they rolled the barrel down into the water. Son. That's easy, easy. After that, the peasants went home, and as they were... Easy. After that, they went home and entered the village. The small peasant also came quietly in, driving a flock of sheep and looking quite contented. Then the peasants went astonished and said, "Peasant, from whence do you come? Have you come out of the water?" "Yes, truly," replied the peasant. "I sank deep, deep down, until at last I got to the bottom. I pushed the bottom out of the barrel and crept out, and there was pretty meadows on which a number of lambs were feeding. And from thence I brought this flock away with me." Said the peasants, "Are there any more there?" "Oh, yes," said he, "more than I could want." Then the peasants made up their minds that they too would fetch some sheep for themselves, a flock apiece, but the mayor said, "I come first." So they went to the water together, and just then there came with some of the small fleecy clouds in the blue sky, which are called little lambs, and they were reflected in the water, whereupon the peasants cried, "We already see the sheep down below." The mayor pressed forward and said, "I will go down first and look upon me, and if things promise well, I'll call you." So he jumped in. Splash went the water. It sounded as if he were calling them, and the whole crowd plunged in after him as one man. Then the entire village was dead, and the small peasant, his sole heir, became a rich man.